Hello, everybody, and we are here for another week of Make It Myself, an independent artist forum. Something that I've been doing now for almost 3 months. I think the virtual world has made us all become so entrepreneurial, I would say, in one sense. But I'm super excited for today's guest because, we've met not very often, but I think every time we've met, there's just been such a connection, such a bond. And I will not take any credit for that. I think it's completely my guest who should be given all the credit. And who am I talking about? Nobody but Mariyam Thomas. Hello. Hi. How are you doing?
I'm good. I love the fact that you intro me as like, you don't even need to be friends with her. She's practically already your friend.
Yeah, I think that is nice because, it's like you may meet some, generally people take time to kind of, connect and all. I think we didn't have that problem at all. The first time we spoke, which was, I think, a couple of years back, you were just so warm. You still are so warm. It's just touch wood, really touch wood. Oh, how have you been, first of all? I hope COVID has been keeping you safe.
Yeah, I mean, mainly been indoors. I think just the level of paranoia you have about just things and touching and mask wearing and all that. And, it's just trying to be as cautious as we possibly can. Like I only started sort of going out to do, work outside my house, like in the last couple of weeks, but like still taking crazy precautions, I think, because you're just so paranoid about what could happen. And like just seeing people, when you think about like how you need to protect yourself, you're like, I just need to wear my mask and wash my hands all the time. And considering that this could have been like, if that's the way I have to protect myself, just wear a mask and wash my hands all the time, I think I'm capable of doing that. So that's not the biggest sacrifice in the world. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so ironic, right? I mean, like you said, it's so simple, and yet there have been so many people, especially when you hear about the US, the way they've been trying to, it's ridiculous. But, we're not here to talk about COVID. We're here to talk about what you do and how you've been playing such a major role in growing the independent scene. But, I don't want to talk about that as yet. I really want to talk about, while we are saying that Made in India is your baby, I want to kind of really go back to the beginning when you were a baby. How did things start for you,
Oh my God. I was born in Kerala. And you know how they say, the oldest is to be born in the mother's house and whatever. Right. So I was born in Kerala, but my mom was working in Bombay at the time. We were living in Bombay, but I was born in Kerala, and when I was like 3 months old, moved back to Bombay and living there till 92, 93. And then like every Malayali moved to the Middle East. And then I was living in Doha in Qatar for another like 5-6 years. And then when I was in 7th standard, I was in boarding school. And I was in a place called Rishi Valley School in the middle of nowhere in Andhra. And after my stint in boarding school, I finished my 12th standard and I moved abroad. I was in the UK for 6 years in total. So I started out in a posh little town called Cheltenham, and I was studying advertising there for 3 years. And then I did my undergraduate in journalism in Cardiff University in Wales. And I worked there for 2 years. I worked for a community radio station. I was there, I was a radio journalist. So I was a news editor there with another guy. We were helming the news team. And and then the conservative government at that time won. And I realized, oh my God, it's time for me to leave this country because they might not want me anymore. So and then I left and I came back, but I always wanted to kind of stay in radio. And and then I got an opportunity in Chennai, and my mom saw like my cousin post something about like a job for an English radio station in Chennai, and then I was like, I'm going to try that. And I just moved to Chennai, and I was working there for 1 year for an English radio station called Chennai Live. And I
Okay.
was their creative manager, and I used to host this like little indie music show on the weekends. And that's how I started to discover a lot of these like cool indie bands. And my cousins were in bands because obviously
Right.
Malayali
Right.
and
But which year?
Christian, and I don't know, it's all in bands.
Right. Which year was this when you were in Chennai Live?
I probably was there in 2010, 2011.
Yeah, that's possibly when the indie scene was really starting. I mean, it was just the beginning.
Really?
Yeah, it
I
was pretty
feel
much.
like I feel like there's an entire generation that I missed though. I mean, generation meaning this entire
Yeah,
scene that I missed because when
yeah,
I talk about the independent music scene, I only kind of discovered it then. But there
right,
is literally, most of the people I know who are like hardcore and really know where the sort of independent music sort of like stemmed from. It
right.
really started like for a lot of people in college because
Yeah,
people remember watching like Pentagram, like,
yeah,
at IROC in Rang Bhavan, like so. And then you can keep going back, right? Like I
right.
have found incredible records of some, independent artists that were around in like the 60s and 70s. So I
Right.
think that there have been different eras of it. I feel
Yeah,
like I came a little late to it because I wasn't in college here in India. So I didn't come from like a fandom of everyone going like, oh my God, Zero are so amazing and all these bands that I had never heard of. And
right.
clearly like came from another time that we're from the same generation as me, but just
Yeah,
I wasn't in college here to have experienced like, rocking out at Raspberry Rhino and Juhu. So I never went through any of that. So I had no
right.
idea. So
God, that
I
feels
didn't
like.
have that context, I think.
Yeah, that feels so way back because I mean, you can actually
No, my
say,
generation, but just
yeah.
not my personal experience. So yeah.
Right. But radio was something that, right from the beginning, you seem to have been associated with it. Was that something that you kind of, dreamt of? Or, I mean, that was your, long-term plan, or it just kind of fell into place? How did that really come about?
I think I always wanted to be in media somehow. I didn't really know how. I just knew that I wanted to do something in media.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then when I started studying journalism was
Right.
when I wanted to specialize in radio because I don't know, the audio medium just like there's something about it that I don't know, it kind of struck me a lot more than any other medium. Whether it's,
Hmm.
I love film also, but there was something about radio because I feel like in like being a 90s, 80s, 90s child, I grew up with radio
Right.
having a huge influence on me.
Right.
I used to have my own tape deck and I used to have like my little like cassette and I used to record songs off the radio. And so
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
really vivid memories of all of that, my mother buying
Yeah.
me blank cassettes. So I always had like this huge
Yeah.
connection to radio. And I
Yeah, it's
think,
like when I was growing up, we
yeah,
used to listen to Kuwait radio in those days. That was our, window to Western music. So I remember my
yeah,
sister and me, this was in the early 80s. My sister and me, we used to kind of tune into Kuwait radio and then listen to all the top hits and of that time. So,
yeah,
yeah, you're right. I mean, definitely
yeah,
radio just has always been a very strong medium in that sense. Uh,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, you were part of Radio Midday as well, right? The station in Mumbai.
Um, yeah. So this was like after. So the thing is, I wasn't part of it when it was
Okay.
Radio Midday. I was like
Okay.
Radio One.
Right.
So because it
Right.
had many, it was called Go. It was called like many other
Yes.
things in
Yes.
between. So
Yes.
I joined them. So I did work with N87.in at one point because I was
Oh,
working
okay.
writing about bands and like that was my only stint that wasn't really radio, but I wasn't there for very long. I
Okay.
was like, I think the radio bug just like, I was just like, oh, it's always like itching me. And
Right.
then, yeah, and then when I moved, because of N87.in, I moved back. And that's like really when I made like sort of strong connections with the independent music scene because N87 was
Right.
just such a huge part of the scene at that time. And
Right.
I was there, I think the first ever N87 weekend was 2011. And I joined them
Yes.
a little before their festival in 2012. I was with them for about 9 months. So basically I was there sub editor, I was writing for their website.
Mm.
working with other journalists and photographers
Right.
and videographers. So it was really fun to be a
Right.
part of that because I felt like I hadn't been, but then I still wanted to go back to radio because that's still a medium I
Right.
knew best. And
Right.
then when I did, I was initially started doing the like the weekend show for Bombay and Delhi for Radio One here
Yeah.
in Bombay. And
Yeah.
then they moved me to the afternoon show. So I used to basically do a request show, which is so fun to do. Taking
Yeah.
requests is like, oh, I enjoy that so much because then you really get to understand people's taste in music and what they love. And then you start
Yeah.
to forge these relationships with people because you're always interacting with them for requests. And there
Yeah.
was this entire posse of like One Direction fans who
Yeah.
absolutely like they were like my people, like just because
Right.
they were these incredible girls who just had such
Yeah.
confidence and they were so amazing. So if anyone trolled me on Twitter, like they'd like defend me and like yeah, there were I was just like I still keep in touch with them even now, even though I've left radio like over 5 years ago. I
Uh-huh.
still keep in touch with a couple of them like now, and they're doing amazing things. Like they're out of college and designers and doing all kinds. So it's for me, it's exciting because like
Yeah.
people still kept in touch with me even
Yeah.
after that time.
But that's the beauty of things. I mean, of course, even with the RJs that are there today, there is a kind of bond. Like when you think of people like Rishi
Yeah.
and Archana and different stations, of course. I mean, but I remember like even when I was with Channel V, the kind of VJs we had, they really were superstars. And I think you guys, the early bunch
Yeah.
of RJs that were there in the radio space were you're the celebrities. I mean, you are now. I won't say were. You are celebrities in your own right, and it's because there is a connect. And I mean, I think one
Yeah.
thing that music streaming has done is it has really taken away that celebrity status that VJs and RJs had. You're just listening to music. You don't really care who's. But you guys created a dialogue. You actually gave the reason for an RJ to be there or someone who will link one song to the other. How do you think the scene is now? I mean, especially with music really pouring out of everybody's ears and so easily accessible.
Well, I think, and again, this is obviously gonna give away like the generation gap, I guess. But I think streaming music to some extent has definitely changed the landscape of like how we consume artists and songs and whatever. And I do think to some extent, I lived in a generation where piracy was a really big problem when it
Yeah,
came to selling your music, right? My
yeah,
brother and I were talking about, and just like my brother and I had this discussion, and it's so funny. I had the same discussion with a recent interview I did with like Divine, and we were talking about bootlegs, like when we used to get, and I was like, I haven't heard the word bootleg in like years. Like used to get bootleg albums and all that kind of stuff. Like no one understands like what is bootleg. It's
yeah,
new shoes, no. But like that's like so it's things like that. It's like how you would get music, how would you consume music has like really changed.
yeah,
Obviously, like I said, piracy has changed that because now you have the ability to, listen to music and like that contributes to like a stream and that gives an
yeah,
artist something and you get to see those numbers and you get to understand it. I also think that right now there is to some extent a giant machinery, right? That you don't really have control of as someone who's an independent artist. I think that can be quite scary, especially if you have to be like your own promoter or your own manager. Besides making the music, like recording it and then like producing it and mixing it and getting all that stuff done, you also
right,
are your own manager. You're also your own promoter. You also have to get your own live gigs. You also have to do your own social media. You're your own peon. You're literally everything. And it is hard. It's a lot
right,
of work to have to like constantly be in a space where you're trying to push what you're doing in your creative work.
right,
And it
right,
can get like, it can be really hard. And trying to create a space for yourself and for people to actually get your music. It's not that easy here because independent music is not seen in the same way here as it would be in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So you go to the UK, you go to the US, it's like not the same.
Yeah.
And then you're talking, it's one of those things that we've talked about before, which is the sort of behemoth that is Bollywood music and the kind of, control that they have. And it's, and the giant, like, sort of cogs in the many wheels that is. And so now in the lockdown has been really interesting because there haven't been any like major film releases during the lockdown, but like independent artists are just putting out music like crazy, and it's amazing. They're able to just be at home and then work on stuff. So that's what's been exciting for me during this time. It's just like the amount of like new music coming out. It's really great. So yeah.
Right. So Made in India, I mean, how did that come about? What made you take that route? And obviously you've kind of spent so much time with independent artists and independent music, but was this something that you started after you left radio? Why did you leave radio? I mean, what happened out there?
So thankfully I worked for a radio station that at least gave a block of time, on FM, on the airwaves, where you could listen to independent music. So it was like a slot, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Thursday night. And I used to produce that show. So I used to find, so artists knew me because of like N87. They also knew me because I used to produce the show. And I, at that time, I used to like the radio studios that you have aren't like the BBC's, like sort of like where you can sit and plug in your guitar and you have this like beautiful like space in which you can actually like, no, it's like a tiny cupboard of a space where you barely can squeeze in to like perform a song. And I felt like, these studios weren't equipped to record musicians for sure, let alone record them live. I also felt like we weren't doing enough for like independent artists, like, FM commercial radio stations. I mean, definitely I worked for an English language radio station, but for any others, it was not the same at all. And this was like just 5 years ago. And then I left radio because I got a little jaded anyway. I felt really creatively stifled. I felt like I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. I couldn't like have fun on the radio, right? Like do fun things to be able to like, I worked with amazing people. I was really lucky. And that came like across the board from programming to sales to whatever. But I just felt like I wasn't able to do the fun things I wanted to. And then I left, and my plan was just to freelance for a couple of years and then figure out what I wanted to do. And I wanted to freelance because I just wanted to have freedom. I didn't want to work in a full-time job anymore. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted to be able to like write and like do voiceover work and whatever that it is I wanted to do. And I realized that like when you're freelancing, right, you're in what I like to call the equilibrium of broke. You're either broke because people aren't paying you, if you do have money, then you're probably saving up for the next time that you're broke. So it's this equilibrium of broke. But I loved it because it wasn't about money. Like when you're freelancing, it's like the one thing that's so precious to you that you have is time. You have time. Like it's unbelievable. Like when you're freelancing, it's amazing to realize and value like time, because of someone, working full time, you realize that you're just working all the time, and back home you're tired. And when you're freelancing, you're like, gosh, I have time. It's amazing. It's like you value it so much more. And then so what happened was after I left radio, maybe a month or two after I left, I got approached to create a podcast. And they were like, you can make whatever it is that you want. Like, tell us if you have any ideas. And I did have a couple of ideas. I told you I was really into like films. I was a bit of a film geek, or it was going to be independent music. And then I decided that I wanted to do something for independent music. Like I wanted to be able to like bring artists into the studio and do live sessions with them, like interview them and do live sessions, because it is extremely expensive to like record an album or record a single or record an EP. And a lot of artists don't release music regularly. So how do you keep track of like music that they're working on? So you can bring an artist to interview them, but you need to also listen to their music, right? So then I wanted to get them to come into the studio and perform live. And then that would be sort of mixed and mastered and all that kind of thing. So that's how because I'm a bit of a stickler for sound as well. So that's how Maed in India sort of came about. And the name of the show came about because when I was doing the request show on radio, I played someone's song that they wanted, and they sent me a tweet and they put like, "Oh, thanks so much for playing my song, #made my day." And I was like, what? Taking that from the pocket. It was amazing. And then that kind of stuck with me. Someone made this hashtag. And then Maed in India came about from actually that Twitter hashtag that someone made my day, then became Maed in India. I was like, oh, maybe I could do Maed in India and like play on my name. And that's how Maed in India sort of like came about.
That's amazing. I mean, I think, when you start actually creating a career out of something that is close to you, it doesn't feel like a job anymore, right? It just feels like you're doing what you want to do. You're constantly meeting new talent. And tell me, what has been that experience? You obviously are meeting talent of all calibers, and the show has reached a good popularity status. So I'm sure some of the big names also have come on board. How has that experience been? And are you collaborating with them on anything further, or does it end with the show?
So the idea is that like I wanted the show. So what Maed in India represents is music discovery, because that's my experience of like, I talked about radio, right? Like for me, it was always about discovering music, because that sort of like spark of like hearing a song and you're going, oh my God, I love this. And I wanted to have that. I wanted people to come to the show and discover music, discover artists and stuff that they may have heard before, stuff they've never heard before. And I never claimed to be like a great judge of like, oh my God, this music's amazing and that like sucks. I never want to be that person. And I don't consider myself a critic, which is why, like, when I play music on my show or I bring artists onto the show, I always say, this is music that I like, because I think music is also really subjective. I also think that like I have artists sent me songs and I might not like that song that they sent me. So I go through their whole discography, and sometimes I'll find a random gem of a song that's, oh my God, that one. I was like, can I play this song on my show? Not that one. And again, it's not coming out from a place of like, I don't think this is good enough. It's just like, not really my jam. I prefer that one. And so I always come from a place of like fandom and like being someone who like, oh, I like this kind of music. But I've been really lucky that like, I think for me, the one thing about the show is that I love to listen to new music. I love to discover artists. I love that. And it's always, I always like, and I know this sounds really weird. And yes, I've been very lucky to have some of the most talented people and some like veterans, like everyone from your Uday Benegal and what's it called? Indian Ocean. And man, I got a chance to interview Apache Indian, which was like, oh, my 90s heart went through the roof. So for me, I've been able to like talk to some incredible artists, but I always like the little guys. I always like the ones that you would have never heard of before. Like I'll tell you about, oh, have you heard of like Adi Manral from like Masudi? He's like this really incredible like singer-songwriter. Or what, like, do you know about this coming together of a bunch of like amazing artists called the Castless Collective from Chennai? Have you ever heard of? So like, I can tell you about all these amazing artists that like just no one has heard of, and I'm just like, you have to hear their music because what they're doing is incredible. And so for me, that is far more exciting than and not that I don't like the biggies, but like I think I have a soft spot for some of the artists that like I feel like you should discover. So that is where like my real core happens.
Absolutely. I think when we look at where the music scene is going today, there needs to be some literary torchbearers who are going to support, because, I mean, it's a little like what we are doing in the ghazal scene, like we've been partnering with Pankaj Das, for a ghazal property that he does. And for the last 3 years, as part of the company that I work with, we've been running these talent hunt because after a point, where is the genre going to go if it's going to stop with only the big names? You need to look at how can you create the pathway for the newcomers and the ones who will be the next. If you actually see Bollywood's going through that phase as well, right? Because I think the Khans are pretty much going to be over and done after another couple of years, and that's why you suddenly see all these Ananya Pandays and all of these girls and all of these guys getting a lot of airtime. But Bollywood is Bollywood. You just need to say that you're associated with Bollywood, and there'll be a whole line of people standing behind you. So I think someone like you, literally having taken the onus of building a format like Made in India to showcase, plays a big part in actually. And what else is Bollywood? It's all just about media, PR, and visibility. So. I mean, kudos to what you're doing, and I think we just need more players to be able to do that, and just keep giving more face time to the independent artists. One of the things that I would like to also before we actually end today, one of the things that I ask every guest who comes on is, what does Make It Myself mean to you?
Wow. I guess when you say make it myself, I don't know, this sounds like a really weird link. Kind of reminds me of like Lego. I know this sounds really bizarre.
Okay.
Just roll with me, Somini, okay? When you're a kid and you get like a Lego set, right? And you get the instructions with the Lego set.
Right.
I used to always follow the instructions, but then the moment you're done with that, you can break it all up and then make it something that isn't following what it's supposed to be. It then becomes literally your own, right? So I feel like when I think of Make It Myself, it reminds me of like getting a Lego set, but not following the instructions.
Not following. That is so cool. I mean, so in one way, Make It Myself is actually doing something which doesn't follow the norms and actually still making it yourself,
Don't follow
right?
the rules, break the rules.
Where do you see Made in India go, say, in the next 5 years? I mean, how is the pandemic and the lockdown affected your work, in that sense?
Not being able to go into the studio has like been breaking my heart. Like I get that bug. I love being in the studio, right? I think I've always like really liked that, whether it was a radio studio or a recording studio. And I've really missed that for sure. I've missed being in the studio. I've missed hanging out with artists. Like musicians are so fun. Like it's just crazy how wonderful they are. And so I think I've missed that a lot. But I've been getting such a flood of like new music during this time. At least I've been able to keep the show alive, like creating these little mixtapes and putting sort of music together from artists, because I think there's still so much music to discover. My hope for Made in India is that I want it to be even more than just a podcast, right? Like I'd love to create like a video series. I've been wanting to do this where I take Made in India on the road, and I travel, like literally travel with like, to be able to record artists like in different parts of the country, because I just think that like so much of it is from urban areas, but there's also so much music that's coming out of like the most remote parts of like, of India. And I think that's also really important. And I don't think that language or geography should be a barrier. If I have to climb a mountain to find an indie artist, I will do it.
More power to you, girl. I think we have somebody who is actually, there's a person called Jat Aman who's saying hello. Interesting. Okay. But this is really sweet. I feel we definitely in our own capacity are doing what we can to bring the independent scene into a mainstream scenario where people, and I think it's in one way we both have done it, and other players who are in the space have also done it. I remember when I started off with Artist Aloud, we used to have people say Bollywood, yeah, non-Bollywood, but now we're in a place where people understand hip hop, they understand rap, they understand jazz, and that there are different genres. Yeah, so
exactly.
I think as long as we are educating people, we have a business to run. Okay, there's a person called Sean Phantom, I think known to you, and he says, keep kicking ass, May. Sorry, Sean. All right. Sounds
that is
good.
So funny.
Sounds great. So thank you so much, May, for taking your time out on this. And I look forward to catching up again. All the best. And
take care of yourself. Yeah.
You too. And hope to see Made in India in more avatars. Bye-bye. Good night.